£10,000. Let's say you put £10,000 into a cash ISA today. The best easy access rate on the market right now is around 4.5%. In 20 years, at that rate compounded, you'd have roughly £24,100. That sounds decent. That sounds like your money working. Now let's run the same number through a stocks and shares ISA, invested in a low-cost global index fund, earning a long-run nominal return of around 7% per year. In 20 years, you'd have approximately £38,700. That's a difference of £14,600 on the same £10,000. Same ISA wrapper, same tax-free protection. The only difference is where the money sat, and that's before we account for inflation. Because here's the part that gets quietly glossed over. That 4.5% cash ISA rate, it's nominal. It's the number before inflation takes its cut. Inflation was running at 3.3% in March 2026. It then fell to 2.8% in April 2026, according to the ONS. Using the March figure, your cash ISA is giving you a real return of about 1.2%. Not 4.5, 1.2. Now let's run the 20-year number again with that figure. £10,000 at 1.2% real return. You'd end up with purchasing power of roughly £12,700 in today's money. The stocks and shares ISA, using historical real returns of around 5% after inflation, around £26,500 in today's purchasing power. That gap of £13,800 is not the difference between being smart and being stupid. It is the difference between understanding one concept that nobody properly explains to people when they open their first ISA. And this video is about that concept. Let me describe someone. You got to a point where you had a bit of money saved up, not loads, enough to feel like it should probably be somewhere official. So you opened an ISA, almost certainly a cash ISA, because that's what the bank offered you, because it said instant access and tax-free on the tin, because you'd heard the word stocks, and it felt like something other people did. People with suits and spare money, people with the confidence to lose some of it. So the cash ISA it was. And honestly, it felt responsible. It felt like the right thing to do. You set up a standing order, or maybe you dropped in a lump sum. And then, like most people, you mostly left it alone. You check the balance occasionally. It's going up, slowly, but it's going up. The app tells you you've earned some interest. You think, good, that's working. And in the background, you've got the real stuff, the direct debit for the rent, the energy bill that's still higher than it was 3 years ago, the council tax that went up again in April, the car insurance renewal that somehow costs more than last year, the Tesco shop that keeps coming to a number that surprises you. You're not being reckless. You're just living, and the ISA sits there, quietly, doing its thing. Here's what nobody told you. While the ISA balance goes up in numbers, what that money can actually buy may barely be moving at all. And for many people, it's actually going backwards. Not the number. The number might still go up. The purchasing power. The thing that actually matters. This isn't about you doing anything wrong. This is about a choice that most people make by default. The cash ISA versus the stocks and shares ISA, made without ever having the actual numbers explained to them. So let's explain them. Here is the question this video is actually answering. Is a cash ISA the safe option? Or is safe just a word we use to describe a risk we haven't learned to see yet? Because there are two types of risk when it comes to your savings. There's the risk you can watch. The number going down on a screen when markets fall. That's visible. That's scary. That's what most people are trying to avoid. And then there's the risk you can't see. The purchasing power of your money being quietly eroded by inflation, year after year, while the number on your screen stays perfectly still, or even creeps up. One risk is dramatic. One risk is invisible. Neither is safe. By the end of this video, you'll be able to look at your own ISA and understand what risk you're actually carrying. Let's put some numbers on the table. First, inflation. CPI in Britain was 3.3% in March 2026. It fell to 2.8% in April 2026, according to the ONS. A basket of goods that cost you £100 a year ago would cost you £103.30 today. Your money has to grow by at least the rate of inflation just to stay still, just to keep buying the same things. Second, the cash ISA rate. The best easy access cash ISA rates right now sit around 4.5 to 4.6%. That sounds comfortably ahead of inflation, but that's the best rate for people who have actively shopped around and switched providers. The average easy access cash ISA across the whole market pays closer to 2.7%. That means a huge amount of money is sitting in older or forgotten accounts, paying far less than the headline rate. If you haven't actively switched your cash ISA in the last 12 months, there is a reasonable chance you're not earning 4.5%. You might be earning 2.5. You might be earning less. At 2.5% against 3.3% inflation, your real return is negative 0.8% per year. Your balance is going up. Your purchasing power is going down. Third, how most British people use their ISA allowance. In 2023 to 2024, cash ISAs attracted over £69 billion in new money. Stocks and shares ISAs attracted just over $31 billion. Around two-thirds of all ISA accounts are cash ISAs by number, though it's worth knowing that by total value, stocks and shares ISAs are actually larger. They now account for roughly 59% of all ISA wealth, more accounts in cash, more money over time in equities. Fourth, and this is the number that puts everything in context, the long-run historical real return of a globally diversified equity index fund is approximately 5% per year above inflation. Not every year. Some years it's up 20%. Some years it's down 30%. The ride is not smooth, but over 20-year rolling periods, the number almost always lands somewhere in the 4 to 6% real range. 4 to 6% real return versus 1 to 2% real return on the best cash ISA. That gap, compounded over 2 or 3 decades, is not a small difference. It's the difference between a retirement fund and a shortfall. It's the difference between options and constraints. And yet almost nobody explains it plainly to people when they're opening their first ISA. So let's explain it properly. Most people carry one belief about ISAs: cash ISA safe. Stocks and shares ISA, risky, it's clean, it's simple, it's almost universally held. And it is only half the picture. The belief comes from a reasonable place. We've all seen the small print. The value of investments can go down as well as up. We remember 2008. We've heard stories of people losing money in the markets. That risk is real. It exists. We're not dismissing it. But here's what that belief leaves out. Inflation is also a risk. Inflation is not a background condition. It is a mechanism that actively reduces what your money can do. Every year that your savings return less than inflation, you are poorer in real terms. Not poorer on paper. Poorer in the sense that what you can buy with that money has shrunk. Inflation doesn't feel like a loss. It doesn't trigger the same gut response as watching a portfolio drop. But it is a loss, and the financial services industry has not exactly rushed to explain this to ordinary savers. Cash ISAs are simple to understand, easy to sell, and comfortable to hold. They generate deposits. Banks like deposits. There's another part of the illusion worth naming. A lot of people think the stocks and shares ISA is for people who know what they're doing, people who read the Financial Times, people who understand price-to-earnings ratios, people who choose individual stocks. But that's not what a stocks and shares ISA has to be. A stocks and shares ISA can hold one single low-cost global index fund. You don't choose individual companies. You don't read earnings reports. You buy a tiny slice of the entire global economy and you leave it alone. The FTSE All-World Index, the Vanguard Life Strategy Funds, a basic global tracker from any major platform. These are not exotic instruments. They are the opposite of exotic. They are boring by design. The complexity of investing has been used, consciously or not, to keep ordinary people from accessing ordinary returns. Let's go through the actual mechanism that makes it work. Compound interest is the thing everyone has heard of, but there are two versions of it, and which version is working for you depends entirely on where you're standing. Here's the first version. You put money in an account. It earns interest. Next year, it earns interest on the original amount plus last year's interest. The growth rate stays the same, but the base it's growing from gets bigger every year. That's compound growth working for you. The second version is compound inflation. Your money earns 2%. Inflation is 3.3%. You lose 1.3% of purchasing power this year. Next year, you lose 1.3% of a slightly smaller base, and the year after, and the year after that. The number on your screen goes up. Your purchasing power quietly declines. These two mechanisms are running simultaneously in your savings account. The question is, which one wins? Let's make this concrete. Imagine a pump. The Cash ISA pump pushes money in at 4.5%, but there's a drain at the bottom pulling out 3.3% per year. The net flow, the water level actually rising, is 1.2%. Now imagine a second pump. The Stocks and Shares ISA pump. It doesn't flow steadily. Some years it pumps in 20%. Some years the drain overpowers it and the water level drops. But on average, over 20 years, the net flow is closer to 5%. After the inflation drain, the first pump feels safer because you can see the water level rising every day, consistently, predictably. The second pump is harder to watch. The water level bounces, it scares you. But over 20 years, the tank is dramatically fuller. And here's the mechanism that most people miss. Compound growth accelerates over time. It's slow at the start and fast at the end. At a 5% real return on £10,000, year 1 gains you £500. By year 10, the growth that year is over 800. By year 20, the growth that year is over 1,200. The returns in the final decade are bigger than the returns in the first decade, which is why time in the market is the actual mechanism, not timing the market, not finding the best stock, not watching financial news, simply starting sooner rather than later, and not pulling out when it gets uncomfortable. Every year you delay is a year of compound growth you can never get back. This isn't about being clever. It's about understanding that time is the asset. You're either spending it or investing it. One more thing on the mechanism. The ISA wrapper is one of the most powerful financial tools available to ordinary British people. Inside an ISA, your gains are completely free of tax. No income tax on interest. No capital gains tax when you sell. No dividend tax. The annual allowance is £20,000. Most people use a fraction of it. And the ISA allowance you don't use this year is gone. It doesn't carry over. The 5th of April is a hard reset. Every year you leave your ISA allowance unused, you're leaving the most tax-efficient savings vehicle in Britain sitting empty. Inside, it could be a cash ISA earning 1.2% real, or a globally diversified index fund historically returning 5% above inflation. Same wrapper, same tax protection, very different engine. And there's one more thing worth saying, because the government has just said it in its own way. In the autumn budget 2025, the Chancellor confirmed that from April 2027, the cash ISA allowance for anyone under 65 will be cut from £20,000 to £12,000. The overall ISA allowance stays at £20,000, but £8,000 of it will be ring-fenced for investing, not cash. This is the first time in decades that the government has actively legislated to push savers away from cash and towards equities. You can agree with that policy or disagree with it, but the fact that it is happening tells you something important. Even the people who design the rules have looked at the data and concluded that too much money is sitting in too little growth. If you are under 65, the 2026 to 2027 tax year is the last full year under the old rules. The clock is running. Let me introduce you to Priya. Priya is 31. She lives in Nottingham. She's an NHS Band 6 nurse, a specialist a few years into her career. She earns around £40,000 gross before overtime or unsocial hours. She rents a one-bed flat for around £850 a month. She runs a car because her hospital shifts don't fit around the buses. She's not extravagant. She buys own brand where it makes sense and treats herself where it doesn't. 3 years ago, when she moved out of a house share and finally had a bit of breathing room, she opened a cash ISA. She put in £3,000 from her savings. She set up a £200 monthly standing order. She hasn't really looked at it since. The balance right now sits at approximately £8,200, including interest. She thinks of it as her safety net. She thinks of it as doing the right thing. And she is doing the right thing. Saving it all with an ISA wrapper is ahead of most people her age. But here's what Priya doesn't know. She opened that cash ISA back in 2023 when interest rates were still low. Most easy access cash ISAs back then were paying somewhere around 1.5 to 2%. That wasn't an introductory rate. That was just the market. And if she hasn't switched since, there's a reasonable chance she's still sitting on something close to that. If she's on 1.8%, she's losing purchasing power in real terms every single month. Even if she's managed to land on a provider paying 4%, she's earning just 0.7% above inflation. Just. And from April 2027, the rules are changing around her too. The amount she can put into a cash ISA each year drops to £12,000. If she ever wants to use her full ISA allowance, $8,000 of it will have to go into investing. That change is coming whether she's ready for it or not. Now Priya is 31. She doesn't plan to touch this money for at least 15 years, possibly longer. This is long-term savings, not an emergency fund, not money she needs next year. Which means the investment horizon is long enough for the volatility of equities to smooth out. The one thing equities need is time, and Priya has a lot of it. She has two paths. Path 1. She keeps the cash ISA. She shops around and gets the best rate on the market, 4.5%. She keeps contributing £200 a month. She checks it every year and switches if a better rate appears. Solid, disciplined. Smart cash ISA behavior. Path 2. She opens a stocks and shares ISA today this tax year. She moves her £8,200 across via a tax-free ISA transfer. She invests it in a low-cost global index fund. She keeps the £200 monthly contribution going in, invested automatically. She doesn't watch the markets. She doesn't check weekly. She sets it up, leaves it to compound, and checks it once a year. Let's put actual numbers on what those two paths produce for Priya in 20 years, because the gap is the thing that changes how you think about this. Starting balance, £8,200. Monthly contributions, £200. Time horizon 20 years. Path 1, cash ISA. 4.5% nominal, 1.2% real. After 20 years, Priya's balance in nominal terms would be approximately £97,000. That sounds good. That is good. But in today's purchasing power, using a 1.2% real return, that would be approximately £65,000. She put in £8,200 plus $200 a month for 20 years. That's £56,200 of her own money. She ends up with real purchasing power of roughly $65,000, a real gain of about £8,800 over 20 years. Path 2. Stocks and shares ISA. 7% nominal return, 5% real. The long-run historical average for a global index fund. Same starting balance. Same monthly contribution. Same 20 years. Nominal balance, approximately £133,000. Real purchasing power, approximately £103,000 in today's money. The difference between Path 1 and Path 2 in today's purchasing power, £38,000. £38,000, same money, same discipline, same 20 years. The gap is the compounding gap. It's not dramatic in year one. In year one, the difference is about 300 pounds, but it doubles and triples and compounds. By year 20, it's the kind of money that changes whether you have options or not. Now, Path 2 carries risk. In any given year, that stocks and shares ISA could be down 10, 20, 30%. In 2022, global equities fell around 18%. In 2008, they fell much further. Priya would need to not panic and sell when that happens. That's the behavioral requirement. It's real. But the question isn't whether Path 2 is risk-free. It isn't. The question is whether the guaranteed slow erosion of Path 1 is actually safer. Safer than the volatile but historically rewarding Path 2 across a 20-year time horizon. And for most people with a 15 to 20-year horizon, the data says this. The risk you're most afraid of is not the risk most likely to cost you money. Let's be honest about what both paths actually look like to live. Path 1. Priya stays in the cash ISA. She shops around annually and gets close to the best rate. She checks her balance every few months. The number consistently goes up. Slowly. There are no nasty surprises. She never has to watch her balance drop. When the economy wobbles, when inflation spikes, when the news runs stories about market crashes, she feels nothing. Her money is fine, it's all there. The number is fine. But quietly, year after year, the purchasing power sits at roughly 1.2% real growth. In a good year, on the best rate, if she stays on top of it. And from April 2027, she'll also need to start thinking about where the mandatory £8,000 investment allocation goes, even if she doesn't want to. The rules are changing around her whether she engages with them or not. It's not disaster, it's a slow drift. Path 2. Priya moves to a stocks and shares ISA. She invests in a single low-cost global tracker. She sets up the direct debit. She does not look at it weekly. In year 3, there's a market correction. Her balance drops from around £18,000 to £14,000 in a few months. That feels terrible. That feels like a mistake. She doesn't sell. She keeps contributing. 2 years later, the balance is £26,000. By year 10, it's around $50,000 in nominal terms. By year 20, it's approaching $133,000. The ride is not smooth, but the destination is substantially different. Here's what separates the people who stay the course from the people who sell in a panic. It's not confidence. It's not financial expertise. It's one thing. They understood before the fall came that falls are part of the mechanism, not a sign that something has gone wrong, a sign that the mechanism is working exactly as it always has. Priya in Path 2 didn't need to know more than anyone else. She just needed to know that one thing. Path 2 requires patience where Path 1 requires shopping around. Neither is passive. Both require something from you. The question is what you're willing to actively manage. The interest rate risk of cash, or the volatility risk of equities. For a 31-year-old with a 20-year horizon, the data makes a pretty clear argument. Here is the rule to take from this. Don't ask which ISA is safer. Ask which risk you can actually afford. If you need this money in 2 years, cash ISA. You don't have the time horizon to ride out volatility. Protecting the nominal value matters. If you're saving for something 10, 15, 20 years out, the risk of not being in equities is likely greater than the risk of being in them. The question isn't cash versus stocks. The question is, what is this money for, and when do I need it? And then, given that answer, which risk can I actually afford? Most people holding long-term savings in a cash ISA have never been asked that question. They defaulted into safe without understanding what they were safe from and what they were not safe from at all. Ask the question. The answer is different for everyone. But the question, once you've heard it, you can't unhear it. Here's what I want you to take from today. Risk is not one thing. We have been taught by the small print, by the bank branch leaflet, by decades of very cautious financial communication, that risk is the thing that makes the number go down. But that's only one kind of risk. The other kind makes the number go up while the value goes down. It's quieter. It doesn't trigger your loss aversion. It doesn't make you feel anything in the moment. But over 20 years, the second kind of risk, the kind living inside a low real return cash ISA, can cost you more than a market crash ever would. Here is what a stocks and shares ISA actually is. Not a gamble, not a bet, not something for people with surplus money and high risk tolerance. It is a mechanism for letting your savings keep pace with, and over time substantially beat, the cost of living. It is the most tax-efficient version of that mechanism available to ordinary people in Britain, and it has been allowed to feel complicated, intimidating, and not for people like me, when in reality the basic version is just this. One low-cost fund inside an ISA wrapper left alone for long enough. Safety is not where the risk isn't. Safety is where the risk you can live with lives. For most long-term savers, that's not the cash ISA. Here's what I want to know. Right now, what does your ISA actually look like? Cash ISA, stocks and shares ISA, both? Or nothing at all yet, because it's never felt like the right time? Tell me in the comments. No judgment. Wherever you are is a reasonable place to be. But I read every comment. And the real answers, the actual numbers people are sitting with, shape every future video on this channel. Because this channel exists to explain how money actually works in Britain. Not how we were told it works, how it actually works. See you next week.